Good afternoon. Are we ready to start here? All right, well, let's get started. Jill has asked people to go to the breakout sessions because we're going to be recorded in video fashion and preserved forever, so you'll have a chance to sneak out if this gets crushingly boring. I hope it doesn't. I'm Alex Krem, and if you bore easily, don't bother, but if you have insomnia, you can go to either livingunlimited.org or campingunlimited.org and learn about me. I want to start, first of all, by thanking Jill and her crowd for making this happen, especially Uli and Ari. Without your heavy lifting, sir and madam, and your inspiration, Mrs. Escher, none of this would have been possible. Bravo to you. I'd also like to thank our panelists whose lives are filled, and it's good of them to take some of their spare time to be here with us. I thank each and every one of you. The panel is organized in this way. I've asked Desiree to give the big picture, and then I've got two other groups, the Been There, Done That crowd, Anya and Saanen, who are running actual bona fide on-the-go programs with decades of credible experience, and then three that are on the drawing board. So, having said that, I would like very much to introduce Desiree. Desiree is she's almost like Jill. She's one of these people that does everything simultaneously. She's the Director of Community Engagement for the Autism House Autism Foundation. And in that capacity, she's visited almost 100 residential communities across the United States and around the world. She gave the keynote speech to Jill's first housing conference 3 years ago, and I dare say was the impetus to this thing continuing for 3 years. And her understanding and experience is enlightening. It's very tough, given 4 minutes, for her to tell us everything she's learned about this, but she's dauntless and will do her best. She's also the developer of the Autism Housing Network, which is a database program to connect project starters and housing operators with people looking for housing solutions. In addition to that, she's the, I think, founder, but certainly national coordinator of the Coalition for Community Choice, which is a nationwide network of people concerned with CMS final rule and determined to see that there is a full range of choices for parents and children. According to her, her passion is empowering communities to create a future that is exciting and life-affirming for those of all abilities. So that, having said that, I'm going to turn the podium over to Desiree, but you can stay seated, Desiree, and talk from there. Carry on.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for coming. If you haven't figured it out already, there are a lack of opportunities, but there's a lot of really motivated and empowered, because of ASA, parents that are coming together to create solutions. One of the range of those solutions are supportive housing communities, different forms of intentional communities. And because we have a lot of individuals who are up here, I wanted to touch on what were some of the other communities that are not represented on the stage here, and how people are exploring what does it mean to live in a supported housing environment. So the first community that I'd like to talk about is neurodiverse co-housing. And essentially what this is people coming together to build their own neighborhood. So one home might be a retired couple. The next home might be a family who has a child with special needs. The next home might be a home that's shared by multiple people with disabilities. And so it's essentially people coming together to develop their neighborhood. This one's in particular is in Durham, North Carolina, and it was formed because a group of people who went to the same church decided that wouldn't it be cool if we lived a lot closer together? So each of the homes were renovated and looked different inside. One of the models that I think is really great is some of the homes have one unit, so a quarter of the home is created with a separate entrance for their loved one, their adult child with a disability to live in, and then the rest of the home, 3/4 of the home, it's the rest of the family. Maybe one day the rest of the family will move out and that individual can then lease the rest of their home to someone else to be directly supportive roommates, and to have an income stream, or flip that over, they'll be able to live in the house with maybe a couple friends and rent the single unit out as well. So it gives a little bit of an income stream, a little flexibility. Another house is a friendship house. So connecting with a local university and having local university students living side by side with people with developmental disabilities. So in a neurodiverse co-housing, you're essentially buying different units and creating your neighborhood. The next model that I'd like to talk about is the Phase-On community. The Phase-On community was started as a school. So this was a school that individuals were being served, and when they were graduating, what were they graduating into? Not a whole lot. So they developed this apartment building where one floor is particularly for people with autism. And they decided to use different technology to be able to offset some of the in-person direct care. So they have soft surveillance monitoring opportunities where you don't necessarily have to have someone in their apartment with them. They can have this monitoring occurring using smart home technology and different surveillance techniques. And then when there is an issue, they're able to have that on-demand support because there's someone in that building that can be deployed to assist them immediately. And that just grew from a school not being able to see what other opportunities are out there and creating their own. One of the really neat things about going through a school, and this was particularly a school for individuals on the autism spectrum, was that the techniques that were learned for organizing one's life, communication, visual supports, were through the lifespan. So they started in elementary school, middle school, high school, and into independent living, having the same kind of suite of tools for supports, which is really unique. The next community that I want to highlight is a live, work, play community. That can be a farm, or in this case, it's a bed and breakfast. And so this is an old retirement building that Eric's Retreat put together. They're just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you ever go to Minneapolis, you need to stay at Eric's Retreat. It is wonderful. And what they did was one of the floors is housing for the adults that are also part of the hospitality team. So they were the ones who showed me to my room, who asked me what I would like for breakfast, who brought me my breakfast in the morning. They also lead tours. So these individuals that are part of this hospitality team get to take others on tours that are within their interest. One of the individuals is Eric. He's interested in horses. He's nonverbal, but with narration, he can show someone how to groom a horse, what the difference between a trot and a canter is. Another person has a master's degree in an arts program and takes people to the Modern Art Museum in Minneapolis and gives them like a behind-the-scenes tour. And so they get to talk about what it is that they love, that they're passionate about all day long and get paid for it. How cool is that? And then the last type of supported community, you have the neurodiverse kind of neighborhood, right, with neurodiverse co-housing. And then you have more looking at how we can use technology to be able to offset some of the care costs. And then you have the live, work, play model. And then you have more of like a village model, where most of the people who live there have a developmental disability. And there might be neurotypical roommates or neurotypical neighbors that are scattered throughout. One of the communities that I went to that's one of my favorites of all time is in Switzerland. It's called Agiswörz, and it is literally a village within a village. They have a public bus stop. I took the bus from the middle of Geneva, about 20 minutes outside into the suburb Geneva, and got off at the Agiswörz bus stop. They have a grocery store, a barber shop, multiple restaurants, a bakery, all in the same area that specifically is intended to provide employment opportunities for people with developmental disabilities, but the outside community comes to use because they want to go there. It's a quality service that's being provided. There's quality baked goods and other things that are being sold there. So it really is a village model. The other picture that's up there is the Ark Jacksonville Village that was just developed in Florida. 80% of the units are for individuals with developmental disabilities, included in rent, which starts at $250 a month up to $750, depending on if you want a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, and if you want to split your share, is built-in support. So with with what you're paying for rent, you can go and get help with finding a job, or you can go to the cooking class on Thursday night, or you can, go with others and walk down the street to the grocery store. So there's a lot of built-in supports that are put into that space, and they're hoping to be able to work with a YMCA and develop a YMCA on part of the parcel of land. So that's more of like a village planned community type of model that is being developed. So that's kind of a broad range of non-agricultural communities, different models of supportive housing that people are developing in different parts of the country. And the rest of my panel will tell you about a couple more specific options.
Thank you so much, Desiree. I think one of the implicit comments that may not be necessarily made is that we're not really talking about a pillow and a bed and a room when we talk about housing. We're talking about a life. We're talking about a full, rich life, complete with day activities, cultural activities, friendship, and community. And don't be confused. Nobody up here is talking about housing, that we use that as a holding term to talk about these full lives we're talking about. Now, we move from Desiree's terrific survey of non-rural options to what I consider interesting suburban and rural models, the first of which will be Camphill. I'd like you to meet Anya Hobley, who is the co-director of Camphill, California. This is one of 12 Camphills in North America and 125 more or less Camphills around the world. Camphill has been at this for 65 years, more than 65 years, I guess 1940. If you're interested at all in what's happening in this kind of life, you must visit Anya's property in SoCal. She holds tours once a month. She is co-director there, and she's worked her way up. She started as a child with the Waldorf system, so she's been closely associated with this terrific philosophy. Madam?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Anya. And I'm here from Camphill, California. We're in SoCal, just south of Santa Cruz. Some of you may have visited already. And our particular community, we're just one of many, as you heard. Each is an independent nonprofit, so all of the places in North America, and there's also a couple up in Vancouver and Vancouver Island, they're each separate entities. Each one reflects its local demographics, the community they're in. And the way that we were founded is that Camphill has been around in North America since the 60s. And it started on large amounts of property with agricultural communities that were self-sustaining. And from that, there were more and more families who saw the outcomes, which was really the quality of life, the social relationships, the supports. And that's evolved and changed over time. Now we find ourselves in this day and age, in California, the way that we were started was a group of parents called the California Friends of Camphill 20 years ago who said, we want Camphill on the West Coast. They were all on the East Coast. So it really was really strong family advocates who said, we want a sense of community for our children. The options that we have are few and far between. They're not working for us. And so the people that came out and pioneered the community came from Pennsylvania, came from different places. And then we had to work at finding the property, right? In California, that's really challenging. It's very expensive. We also had to find a regional center that would be supportive and interested in working with us. It does require kind of thinking outside of the box. When we talk about the title of this panel, which is Innovative Solutions to Supported Living, that's something that I feel like in Camphill we do all the time. We're constantly innovating, changing, growing with the people that we serve. It's really a long-term solution for people. Often, there's always the option of becoming more independent and not needing to be with us anymore. But the way that it's changed over time is we started with 1 and then 2 6-bed homes. You could call them board and care homes. We call them life-sharing homes. So we have not just 2 staff, we have around 4 for the 6 people that live there, 4 co-workers. So we have both long-term caring co-workers and we also have short-term volunteers who come for a year or 2 of service. And that's actually a step up from a lot of places where you have a high rate of turnover, low pay. We really have a sense of we're a life-sharing long-term community where people are in there for a longer amount of time. We have a component of a training course, and so people can stay 3 to 4 years, and that can lead to a bachelor's degree through Prescott College. So we really try to build in structures that are supportive of retaining the people that work there. And the supported living homes that we have, so we have 5 supported living homes and 2 larger homes, and on 8 properties, all within a 2-mile radius. So our vision is really to be a part of our local community, to be accessing it, to have the ability to change and grow with time, to become more independent with transportation, making relationships in the local community. And our first supported living home was started because of the interest of someone living in a big home who said, I've lived here for 10 years and I want something smaller, right? So we said, great, how can we meet you where you are and create something for that? So we're a nonprofit, we're not a profit-driven place, but we are about creating intentional type community living, innovative strategies, and it's really about interdependence. It's really about, we talk about the theory of things like natural circle of support, people that are in your circle of support. When you have something like the model of Camphill, you have those natural circles of support. There's always people around. You can retreat to your own personal space. You may live in a larger or a smaller home, but there is a sense of community. We all gather every morning for morning circle in our big hall, and then we go off to our different work activities. Some people work in our gardens, our weaving studios. Some people go out to volunteer jobs. One person works at Home Depot. That was kind of after 10 years of living in community, he said, I want to see what it's like to have a job. And we said, great, let's make that happen. So that's why I say that we're innovating all the time, is that we change and grow with the people. And it's really, that comes from our basic philosophy, which is to see the whole person. And so when you talk about also creating house communities, creating community, it's not just about someone's diagnosis or level of ability. We all have to have it. It has to be, in our experience, it's been really helpful to be intergenerational, to have multiple types of abilities and experience, to have different unique gifts. That's what helps create that sense of community. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anya. Well, if Camphill is the grandfather of these living situations in the world, then Vine Village is the grandfather of these situations here in the Bay Area. I'm happy to introduce you to Saanen Kerson. Her family founded Vine Village in 1972 and has directed it ever since. She's a woman for all seasons. I'm proud to announce that she's a UC Berkeley graduate. Good for you, madam.
I feel very strange sitting here,
Yep,
Alex, let me tell you.
And board member of the Napa Valley Coalition of Nonprofit Associations, Livestock Council, Napa Women's Evening Club Edition, Horsemen's Association, Cal Alumni Club, Go Bears, and the Leadership Napa Valley class. She's also coaching the local basketball team and raises horses and cows. So, Saanen, we're glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us all here today. So Vine Village is, as Alex mentioned, an organization that my family and another family founded in the early 70s. It came out of a need in our family. My Aunt Debbie was born 62 years ago with Down syndrome. We celebrated her birthday a couple weeks ago. And at that time, it was a very, very different climate for families facing a child being born with that diagnosis. The doctors at her birth advised my grandparents to leave her there and check her into a state hospital, focus on their sons who might amount to something, and really kind of forget that they had her. And they found that to be a completely unacceptable path. Took Debbie home, advocated for her care, her education, everything that she needed. First, they lived in San Francisco and then moved to Marin County, and they were really pioneers at that time. It was really a time when there were very few programs that existed, very few programs even in the school system. My Aunt Debbie, and along with the child of S.I. Hayakawa, were the first 2 kids in Marin County with developmental disabilities to learn to read. And that was a really something that my grandparents and that other family had to fight for. It was just something that wasn't even going to be attempted. So Debbie continued through school, through public school and then private school, and my grandparents recognized that she needed to have the same types of opportunities in her life that her older brothers had, to have a full life where she could make social connections and have long-term meaningful work and a good place to live that was stable and met her needs in all ways. And they started looking at other programs. They visited one of the Camphill communities in upstate New York. They visited a kibbutz in Israel. They visited a few other programs here in the United States and just kind of started thinking about what would be best for Debbie and for other people like her. My parents were newly married. My parents are sitting here, Michael and Nancy Kerson. They're the ones who have really made Vine Village happen. They were newly married at the time in the early 70s and agreed to come and help get the place started for a month and a half. And here, 44 years later, they've made it their life work. So again, just the idea for Vine Village came from my grandparents networking with other families about what would be the right thing for their children. My aunt really liked horses. She liked to ride. Thought something in the country would be good for her. You would think in Napa County there would be more opportunities like this. It is a rural agricultural community, but there really are no opportunities like that. So in 1972, they put a down payment on this beautiful ranch in Napa and started a nonprofit organization, and the program was born. So fundraising is a huge piece of this endeavor. My parents would say the same, that there's never enough funding, and we've never made admission decisions based on families' ability to pay actual cost of care at Vine Village, but it's difficult, but we're doing it. You know, there are lots of for-profit businesses that have started and maybe not lasted as long, that were much better capitalized in the beginning, and somehow my parents have been able to do this. It's pretty amazing, really. There are 3 homes at the property. We also have a day program. We've had many programs, as Anya mentioned. We're changing all the time as well. We're here for the people who participate in our programs. It's not that we're just deciding, hey, this is what you're going to do and provide that. We change with the times. We used to have lots of classes taught at the ranch through Napa Valley College Extension and other programs. We had, for over 30 years, our own olive oil and wine vinegar bottling operation and sold those products all over the United States. We've had Chardonnay wine grapes for, over 35 years. We just actually pulled those out and switched to growing organic fruit orchard instead. But we have many different things that we do. And one thing that's really neat about our property, we're located very, very close to town. In fact, within walking distance. And within walking distance also to a city bus stop, and we're just 2 minutes. We can, I kind of joke, but if not for trees being in the way, I could see the city limit sign from my office, from my desk, but we're very, very close to town, yet it feels very, very private and quiet and feels like country, because it is. One of the benefits that we have seen over the years are the long-term friendships that develop among the people who live at Vine Village, and also for the people who don't live at Vine Village but come for our day program. And some of those connections are just really, it's profound what some of the people have been able to tell us about what this means in their life. And for some of them who aren't able to say it, we feel it and we see it every day, that they're so happy to have a sense of community. It's kind of interesting times with legislative ideas right now, but community somehow has turned into a different kind of word than the way that I understand it. But community, I think, is something that you belong to and feel part of, that sustains you in some sort of way. And I like to think that that's really what we're providing, not only for the people who live at Vine Village and participate in our day programs, but also for the employees. Most people who work with us have done so for over 20 years, many for over 30 years, and some have been there from the beginning. My parents, in fact, the only 2 employees we have right now who've been with us less than, I think, 15 years are replacing 2 people who retired after 18 and 24 years. So really longevity, and there's a sense of trust and caring that is built over time with all of us, of seeing all of our families through all the life changes that we all go through. That's very, very special. It's certainly why I come back. My parents always kind of say that they told me maybe not to follow in their footsteps at this because it's so much responsibility and it's such difficult work. But I can't imagine doing anything else. It really is what calls me back there. It's my community. It's where I grew up. And it really has shaped my life in so many ways that are incredibly meaningful to me. So I'm very, very proud to carry on the work that my parents have done. But it does cost money to do those things. For those of you who know kind of what the funding structures look like, most programs are reimbursed through federal and state funding sources to kind of pay for minimum wage direct care staff and no benefits. And that's something that my family has always felt very strongly about, that we must take care of the people working with our relatives, because that's a huge part of the community sense there, that people stay longer and care about their jobs and care about the people they're taking care of if they feel like their home and family is secure. And so my parents have been really, really good managers in that way, and we're very, very proud of that. Again, we've been there for 44 years. We're available if some of you are thinking of starting programs. What I always like to tell people is we're just one family, and we're not wealthy people. We didn't have a gigantic endowment to set this place up. My parents did this on a shoestring, and it's kind of amazing. I'm so proud of them. But you can do it if you really feel strongly about this. It may be the hardest thing you ever do, but it'll also be the best thing that you do. So thanks, Alex, for having us today.
Thank you, Saanen, and thanks, Mike and Nancy, for being here, too. They're all available for questions. In fact, everybody here, I've got their email addresses on the screen here. They've put themselves forward as potential victims. Any questions you want to ask, they're all available. We're all in this together. There are other successful models here in the neighborhood. Cedars of Marin in Ross, Sweetwater Spectrum in Sonoma, and the founder of Sweetwater Spectrum is lurking here today, Mark Jackson, available, I'm sure, for questions. This excludes fine group homes and other communities that don't have this contact with nature that we're espousing today. Well, those are the ones that have been there, done that, and wear the T-shirt. We're now going to talk about two that are starting up, starting with Rident Park. And I'd like to introduce you to Larry Grotte, who's chairman, president, and co-founder. He's also a member of the board of GatePath and Together for Choice. He retired in 2009 as a hotshot executive in Silicon Valley, and he's now focusing on building a life for his son, Peter, and planning on a full life, safe, vibrant community. He'd like to share with us now his experience in the process of opening his supported living residential community. Larry?
Thank you, Alex. You said something earlier, Alex, that really sticks in my mind, and I think it's the epitome of what we built Rident Park around, is this idea of the word housing. It is a functional word that we can, with a single word, we can use it as a descriptor, but it in no way, shape, or form describes what the vision of a Rident Park are and many of these other projects, where in our tagline is actually our vision statement. It looks like a marketing statement on our business cards, where home and community are one. That is our vision statement, and in a nutshell, because yes, we are housing 16 residents with a mixture of special needs, not any one particular diagnosis by design. And we really want them to live in a home-like setting. And what you see behind me, hopefully, is what I'm looking at in front of me, is really something that looks very much like a home you would find up in the wine country, because the town of Windsor is located in Sonoma County in the heart of the wine country. We are a few miles from the Russian River. It is a beautiful place to live. It is ranked, Windsor is ranked one of the safest places to live in the United States year after year, which is one of our key criteria. So quickly, how did we get here? My wife, Betsy, and I realized, about 12 years ago, that we ain't getting any younger. And our son, Peter, is profoundly disabled. He's the most loving, affectionate human that I know. And he's oblivious to what the reality of the world around him is. And, you know, at some level, I would like to leave him somewhat oblivious by the world around him, because the world around him will basically embrace him and treat him like a regular human being, like all of us want to be treated. And so the vision of Rident Park is to really embody all of the best practices. And you mentioned Sweetwater Spectrum. They've been held up many times as a model, a national model that many aspire to do. It isn't a model that is for everybody. It isn't a model that is particularly easily done from a financial point of view. But it's clearly an aspirational model that I know that Rident Park borrowed from heavily. We did borrow from many other projects around the United States. One's called Lieberman Foundation in Chicago. It's basically group homes. It doesn't kind of look like Rident Park, but the spirit of the place is incredible, and you come away with tears running down your face. And that was really the thing that put us over the edge. So after 12 years of traveling really the world, Australia, looked at many, many places, we actually created Rident Park out of what we didn't like, mostly out of the other models. And there's another little factor that we, in a way, were forced to bear the burden of, is one of the newer projects on the landscape that has to deal with the CMS rules, which are now heavily weighing on all of our projects, existing and future projects starting in 2014. So the good news is it's sort of like the canary in the cave. Since we're not yet open, we're able to shape our design and influence really how we lay out the property, the setting, which is the other one of those dreaded words that Jill could have used this morning, Uli, is a word that's out there. Setting means the place where, in this case, where people live, and if the setting is deemed with a large I, as an institution, then that's great. You can build it, you can live there, but don't expect any services. So we have really taken that into account as one of the major design factors without trying to compromise the spirit of where home and community are one. So again, we have the benefit of being in real time with the evolution of the federal law being promulgated in the 50 states. The problem is only a handful of states actually have approved state regulations which govern the final on-the-ground rules, and we know that they're different. And so the one thing I want to share with all of you beyond what you see on the screen is that as the co-founder and president of this thing, I spend an equal amount of time in Sacramento. There's people in the room here that I see at meetings all the time. And that's one of the key ingredients, I think, of the New World Order, that projects like ours have to be very plugged in to the political community, the government and the bureaucracy community. Somebody said earlier the regional centers aren't our enemy, the DHCS or DDS aren't our enemy, and I truly have to say I came a little bit from a position of thinking they were more enemy-like than not, and I don't necessarily believe that to be the case. I think there are a lot of well-meaning people trying to do their best to comply so that, let's say it like it is, the Medicaid money can flow, which is the mother's milk for most states. And California being the largest, it's no small thing. However, said that, I do believe there's a heart ticking there. But we know many of these people on a first-name basis. It takes a lot of time to do that. But as something I would urge for those contemplating projects, be it retrofitting your house or doing something on a grander scale like a Rident Park or many of the things that Desiree shared, or trying to do some of the models that you see here in Costanoa Commons, you really do have to become a player on the stage of where government policy is being set and try to influence it. And I actually see evidence, and I'm a fierce conservative skeptic when it comes to this stuff, and I will say I see true green sprouts of hard evidence where California is listening to the collective we. On moderating, I won't get into the details, some of the criteria on how we design these community-based settings. One thing I want to point out that hasn't been made clear, you heard a lot about board and care homes. Well, those are governed by California licensing rules. And California is one of the few states, and Desiree will back me up, that you can actually build a Rident Park in an unlicensed setting. So we are, I guess you could argue, an unlicensed group home. Sounds so illegal. But it's actually but it has a lot of benefits because with it comes a relaxation of the strings attached when it comes for something that's directly tied to a care license. And so we, and not to say that we do things on, in an unethical way or a sloppy manner, but we have much more freedom of how we can run our community, including we don't have the risk. In California, there is a law that can be applied, but sometimes exempted around aging out so children, when they enter a group home, age out at 18, and then adults, non-elder care adults, age out at the age 59 in the state of California. And do the research. There's laws on the book that say at age 59, my son Peter would get a knock on the door. He'd have 1 year to find someplace else to live. Of course, he has no ability to deal with that issue. So, and think of what we talked about in the session before us about what happens when we're gone. Who's going to help Peter make that decision? So we're taking all that into account, and Rident Park is a lifespan facility. People can live there for as long as they choose to live there. It's not a placement. So I just wanted to leave you with those distinctions and welcome to hear from any of you through email or whatever, and really appreciate you coming and look forward to your questions. And Alex, thanks for putting this together.
Thank you, Larry. Well, we've got a team of wonderful magicians, and you watch how a magician shows nothing in their hands, and they reach at their sleeve and they pull out a rabbit. Heidi Cartan has done that. It's explained by the fact that she's a UC Berkeley graduate. She was the first
I may pull the electrical plug on this, Alex.
She's the first IHSS Public Authority Director for Santa Clara County, and she came to this with huge experience as a professional. She almost miraculously, from one moment to the next, has created her own initiative, which she'll tell us about. But when I meet her, I'm sort of stunned by her energy and the progress that she's making on her project. So, Heidi, thank you for being here, and tell us what you will, please, about Costanoa Commons.
Wow, I wish I was half that good. Thank you, Alex.
You're twice that good, madam.
One advantage of coming at the end of the panel is you get to just turn around to all these high-quality folks and say, I just want to be like them. And that's how I feel about the people I get to be up here with today. And quite literally, Camphill and another, I think, sister effort called l'Arche, if some of you are familiar with the l'Arche movement, which is also a worldwide movement of co-living of people with developmental disabilities that started in France, was really my inspiration for Costanoa Commons, but of course my real inspiration is my own son. So I sit here representing what I like to call the other developmental disabilities category. My son has cerebral palsy. He's quadriplegic, uses a power wheelchair, needs an iPad to communicate, can do some sign language, but no one else understands that except family members. So uses an iPad to communicate, and is quite significantly physically disabled in addition to his developmental disability. And my past life, prior to becoming a mom, was about geriatric social work. And interestingly, I was working on developing community-based long-term care programs before I ever met my husband, before I ever had children, with a real commitment and out of my work at the World Institute on Disability to really create, and driven largely by cost, to be perfectly honest, about trying to get folks to recognize that the costs of institutional care were so much higher than the costs that consumers preferred, which was to be at home and be in the community. And in the case of seniors, that meant their own homes. So that was sort of the background that I brought to this. And again, as my son will be 21 at the end of this month, and thinking about, what does his future look like has plagued me really since it became clearer that he was even going to have a full life. That wasn't clear for the first 5 years of his life to begin with. So it's been a process. It's been slow. The gray hairs that I have now, Alex is crediting me with a lot of energy, but my husband and I are tired, to be really honest. This has been a long road, and we talk about all the skills we have to have. It's not enough to be a good parent. It's not enough to be a good advocate. Now we got to create our own housing situations and community building. And, we welcome that challenge in many ways because there's nothing more important to us than our children and their future. But I have to say that if there weren't the Commons, which our name is very intentional, the Costanoa Commons, if there weren't the opportunity to undertake this with other families, with other parents, I don't think we could do it. I mean, it just by nature. And to me, that's one of the words that I wanted Jill to put on her list of many we need to take back. And I think I'm echoing what Larry said as well. And what you talked about, which is community. You know, community has somehow, in the course of this HCBS dialogue, become a little bit of a dirty word. And I think we need to reclaim it. I think we need to claim it for what it actually is, which is about relationships. And what's so inspiring for me to be here today is that I feel like everybody who's here today gets that already. Like, I don't have to explain why that's important or why that matters. And Costanoa Commons is really a response to, as Larry said, the new climate which we're in. And it's also a response to what I personally believe and have come to learn over the course of my career and my life about what really matters. And so it's fabulous to hear someone else who's been successful, Camphill and Vine Village, say, this is not a situation that money solves. This is a situation, you get quality of life, you get meaning, you get, you know, what we all want, community, because you bring people together and because you treat people well. And so my intent with Costanoa Commons and the family partners that we are working with now, we are 11 families who have come together. We've done something very countercultural. We threw all our money in a pot together and we bought a property. We are 3/4 of a mile from downtown Santa Cruz on a 7-acre property, a historic property that had been in the same family for 3 generations. And frankly, the only reason we got it is because we came in and proposed to do with it what we want to do with it. And the seller was sympathetic to that. And in part, what we want to do in addition to creating affordable housing and high-quality housing that is designed for a lifespan, again, you heard me say my son is in a wheelchair. I went and visited the L'Arche community in Tacoma, Washington, which is where I saw my first farm-based community. Then I met Anya and got to see something similar at Camphill that affirmed all of what I saw was the richness of that, but nobody was in a wheelchair there. And so I'm thinking, okay, how do you also do this for somebody with mobility impairments, and how do you do it for a lifespan? You know, with some good fortune, all of our children will also become old people someday. And what I didn't want to see happen for my son is that he has a community, he has relationships, and then because, I mean, in his case, it's not really relevant because he's already there, but for somebody who doesn't have a mobility impairment and acquires an age-related disability, do they then have to leave their lifetime home because the home itself is not accessible? And I saw that over and over again. So Costanoa Commons is also building with universal design in mind. We are adopting something some of you may be familiar with, an architect out of the Northwest, Ross Chapin, who's written a great book about pocket neighborhoods, and we are creating a pocket neighborhood in Santa Cruz. So we're in this fortunate situation where we're 7 acres among 20, and these 20 have not been developed. It will change, but we are building a cluster of housing that where we will be our children's landlords, essentially. So the concerns about having your child, you know, priced out and not be able to afford their rent, having a place sold out from under them, having a place closed because they can't afford to stay open anymore, those are problems that we've tried to address. It's not perfect. We won't solve everything, and as hard as this part is, it is not as difficult as doing the hard work of community building that really is going to sustain any place, I think, and make it the meaningful quality environment that we all want. Part of my personal belief about that and why we are creating an adjacent organic farm that I'm going to do my darndest with while I'm still drawing breath to make accessible to people with physical disabilities as well as cognitive ones, is that I think when you are in nature, when you are in a natural environment that is being cared for and work is shared there, recreation is shared there, relationships build side by side, people with and without disabilities, you get a quality environment that I hope we have the situation Vine Village has where we have longevity of staff. You know, I think you cannot expect that on what we currently compensate people for what I would say is some of the hardest and most important work in the world. And we don't treat it that way. And I can't change the reimbursement rates, that the regional center is going to pay, but I can do something about the environment where people are working and how they're treated. And so that's my intention with Costanoa Commons, and the intention and the piece that we are asking family partners who join with us to commit themselves to. We're not a group of professionals. We haven't done this before. This is a bootstrap kind of, I drove a tractor and put a cover crop in 2 weeks ago, and I just moved from downtown Mountain View 9 months ago. So I'd never sat on a tractor before. So this is a real, we got to get in there and learn how to do what we got to do so that we can, because, UCSC is telling me soil fertility, you got to get a cover crop in. Okay, how do I do that? So, it's a real hands-on, roll up your sleeves kind of operation, but I think my husband has some experience in property development and building houses. We obviously bring a lot of experience of living with somebody with a physical impairment as well as a developmental one, and my entire background has been in nonprofits. So I think we're in a good position to join with other people and bring a set of skills, but we absolutely need the skill set that has come to us from our family partners, and that's what I think will make the difference. And Larry and I met, I think, a couple of years ago when both of our ideas were gelled in our own minds, but I don't think either of us had acquired any property yet. In our case, we were still putting together. We had already had our nonprofit. We thought we were going to do the whole thing as a nonprofit. We ended up creating an LLC to make the property purchase, but we didn't have our LLC fully formed when this property came up. And so we did it a little bit backward, to be honest. We just felt like this was the right place for us, and we needed to figure out how to get it. Alex can tell you about some late night phone calls we had with him, but how do we motivate the seller to give us some time? Because once she made this decision to give this property up, she wanted it to happen really quickly, and it's not easy to pull off a deal like that. But it is also fantastic to be able to show people a real place. We're fortunate that this property has water. We have a creek that runs year-round, 5 years into the drought. We have the ability to irrigate our farm field from that. We are planning an aquaponics greenhouse, which within about a year we expect to have about 25 part-time jobs for adults with developmental disabilities on our property that allows for year-round gardening. And of course it solves my problem, which is it's all inherently raised bed gardening, which means my son's going to have a job. So that's our plan. I need to stop. Thank you. I can get excited about what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
But also, please feel free to check the website and let me know if we can answer any questions or be of any help to any of you. Thank you.
Well, you can feel the passion here. I'm delighted. You should know that there are several more just around the corner. Sunflower Hills in Pleasanton, Big Wave in Half Moon Bay. There's someone here from Big Wave, Golden Heart Ranch in Malibu. There's good news and bad news. The good news is that you can see this has been done before. No one is reinventing the wheel. The bad news is that if this is of interest to you, you're going to have to get off your little bottoms and do it, because the Camphills and the Sweetwater spectrums are full. And the purpose of this is to show you how it's done, but not to give you an application that you can fill out and your problems are solved. The message here is, how are you going to make this happen for your family? And with that, I'd like to introduce you, please, to Dan Lieberman, who's on the board of Living Unlimited and a property developer for many years. And he has got a grand plan that he wants to share with you now.
So you've all heard from Jill and others what, the epidemic that's going on. And the problem that we have is, once our kids age out of the school system, is trying to create a life for them as adults, and beyond our lifespan, what's going to happen to them. What we've heard from all these amazing people up here is how hard it is to do this. I mean, I'm amazed at Heidi, and I've learned a lot from what she's done. I've learned a lot. 2 years ago, I came to this conference, and Desiree, just showing me all that was going on, just opened my mind to this. But for the last 2 years, and certainly the last year and a half since Living Unlimited was formed, I've spent countless hours working on this. And everyone here can't do that same thing. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. And the problem with everything that's, being built up here is it gets filled up. And then what do you do? So our goal is to create is to do best practices and create multiple communities and use our skill from doing the first one to help do the second one and help do the third one, and get groups of parents involved to help create those communities without having to learn necessarily 10 years of learning from all these other wonderful people. So what we have up here is basically the principles of the communities we're trying to create, which is, community, meaningful work, safe housing, healthy food. These are the experiences we want our children to have. I have a 20-year-old a son on the autistic spectrum. He's a great kid. I love him at home, but for him, the best thing, I think, is for him to move on and to have a group of peers where he can grow and thrive and develop. And when I see what happens to people at many of these communities, it's what we all should want for our children, even though, again, the government wants us to just keep them at home because it's cheaper. So on the next slide, we're looking at, wow, it's blank. Oh, there it comes. Okay. There are multiple formats, whether it's a farm community or whether it's more of an urban community or a suburban community. We're trying to, create the models that will work. And just like, like a hotel chain like Hyatt, they don't build the building, but they have a program that helps manage all the different buildings that are built by groups of investors who buy and create the buildings that they're going to run. We're looking at getting groups of families together, and whether it's a farm model or whether it's a more urban model, helping them to structure it so it will work and help create the community that we're trying to do in all these different capacities. Not sure what we have next up there. So our goal is Living Unlimited, as obviously we have a time frame of multiple years. Right now we're trying to develop our first communities. We are currently in contract on a property in El Sobrante. We've been in contract on some other properties, but for various reasons, trying to make them work economically for one didn't work out, but this is the process you go through as you're trying to create these things. Our goal is to do several properties, one in the East Bay, one in the South Bay, and then grow from there. And each time from the experience that we've learned, be able to do the next one even better. So with that, I really think we want to open up the whole panel to questions and leave it to you.
Yeah, thank you. We're running over schedule, so I have a list of questions up my sleeve, which I'll keep up my sleeve in the hopes that those of you out there have some, here comes the toughest questioner in the room.
I just want to congratulate Larry and Heidi on getting your projects going. I know 2 years ago when we were here, it was a dream. But can you talk a little bit more about the family engagement process and how you found families to join you? Because I think that's something that's important to hear, that how active you guys are in the community and what you did to find people to join you in this venture here.
This was Mark Jackson, who founded Sweetwater Spectrum, which is considered the gold standard in the town. Who's going to take on that question?
I got the
Larry's
sign
ready.
from Heidi to be the first victim here. Great question and critical question, because all these wonderful plans are just cement, dirt, steel, and plastic. It takes people, and it takes people to share the vision. So Rident Park was co-founded by two families that shared and share a common vision of where this home and community are one. And we seed financed the nonprofit, ridentpark.org. We have developed a whole series of other families that we are coming together. It's really not a transactional process. It's very much a for all practical matters, an extended family for life relationship being germinated. And all these people come to us through referrals, not necessarily people that we already know, and just the power of the network. And now, I mean, I use the word here from my old marketing days of pipeline. We have dozens of families that we are in relationship with, and we're bringing them along as we progress the project. We bring them along, and one of the questions on the table is that it's time, talent, and treasure to make this happen. Because I like to say that we're solving, so the equation that we solve for X is the individual families. So they look, a lot of times, I think somebody said it earlier, could be looking around the room to sign an application for a lease and go live in somebody else's project and live happily ever out there. Trouble is, it takes people like us and others to start something. There just is no inventory that we can tap into, so we have to create the inventory. So we need people to come alongside and get to know us. We get to know them because, for all intents and purposes, we're going to be together well before. I mean, our kids will live another 70 years, and so it's really shared values. It sounds very soft and cliche, but it's absolutely about shared values. There are families that I can honestly say don't fit, and probably we don't fit with them, and we won't waste our time on those families. And it is not about money. So,
Thank you. I'm sorry, pushing on. We're running out of time. Heidi, you want to weigh in on that?
I just want to add one thing, which is nobody should think that this process is without risk, not for us as developers of projects and not for participants. We meet with our families once a month, but the investor family pool has made a real commitment to get to know each other. And we've said this has to be a priority in your life. This is not a write a check and bring your kid in 2 years when the housing is done and move them in. You know, this is about building something together, and I think you have to be very clear about what you're about. And people have to be clear that they're ready to sign up for that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Desiree?
Just really quickly, one of the things that I found in doing presentations and site visits was there wasn't a platform where people can connect. And so we've developed at Madison House Autism Foundation the Autism Housing Network, and part of that is a map where these projects can say, this is my idea or this is my vision, and we need, people to connect with. So we created kind of this online platform so that people can be able to connect with each other as well as access resources, and there's a forum and stuff like that. So I'm not trying to just say, everyone go to the Autism Housing Network, but it really is a place where you can start to see, besides just, the Autism Society having these spaces, if there's other people in your area, if you're not from here, if you have a friend that lives in Colorado or Texas or Chicago, who they can also connect with to be able to put something together or explore. And even if you don't share the same values as, let's say, Costanoa Commons or Rident Park or Living Unlimited, for you to be connecting with other project starters and move forward together, this isn't a competition, friends. We're all in this together, and it's going to take our collective knowledge and efforts to really increase options for the future.
Bravo. Thank you, Desiree. John?
Yeah, for Heidi, you mentioned that the structure that you have for your property is an LLC where everybody contributed to it. And typically in an LLC, there's going to be an exit clause or an exit provisions, and this is a perpetuity. So if this is too personal, you can just say, but I'm just curious how you kind of dealt with that.
Sure, no, great question. I got a little off on tractors and cover crops, and I lost track of my slides, so I apologize. Our LLC is modeled, interestingly, we did it first and then found out about Friends of Children with Special Needs later, but they're another example of how we've done this. We absolutely have an exit clause, including for myself and my husband. We could afford to do this exactly once, and if we got it wrong, we needed to be able to have our investment back to be able to find the right home for our son if this didn't end up being it. So it's crafted that way, and essentially you essentially own a membership. Your membership can be sold. Your membership, it can be sold with timing that is agreeable for the LLC. So, there are limits on both sides so that it's reasonable. But one of the things that we did was we capped the amount that share can appreciate over time. I frankly was not going to do all of this work and ask people to join me in this effort only to have it be something that preys upon the desperation of parents and allows other people to make money. It was very important to me. You know, we need a certain amount of money to do what we're doing, but it was not about making money. It was, you know, and we had families say to us, you know, we had some people say, but I can get more in the market. And I said, absolutely you can, and if that's what you need, don't put your money with Costanoa Commons, because that's not our return. Our
Heidi.
return is a lifelong home.
Thank you. Larry, do you want to
Thank
answer
you.
that same question? Exit clauses in the Rident Park?
You know, our
investment
model
strategy?
is, everything is within the confines of the nonprofit, 501c3. It's a little bit of a Cortez burn your boats and commit, because there's no turning back. And so that is actually an operative philosophy. So we didn't, I mean, both models have merit, and but we chose to simplify it because you have one set of board of directors. It's really a commitment for life, and not everybody's up to that. And so we chose to go this path. And so everything is in the form of a charitable donation. But I will say that we have created a unique feature, that there is an option to a future lease. So for those that are concerned that all they get is a charitable donation write-off, which is wonderful, most families aren't doing it for that purpose. So we have actually created something unique, I'm told, an option for a future lease, so that families that really commit, burn their boats, will secure one of the 16 options so they know that Rident Park gets built, they will have a secured place. So that's how we deal with that issue.
Thank you. Dan, comments?
Well, we haven't built one yet, but you know, similar to a typical LLC agreement, there will be a way that people can exit. And as Heidi mentioned, we also believe that they should not be making money on it, that this is a mission-driven thing. It's for the well-being of their families. We are also looking at, once we get to the point where we have multiple communities, the ability to exchange between communities, because it may not work out, you know? You think people are going to fit well, you put them in, and they don't. So the idea is that this may not be the right place for you, but perhaps one of the other communities is the right place for you.
Thank you, Dan. You right, John? Next question?
Wanted to check to see whether, you know, these all appear to be private pay, donation, charitable models, or maybe not. But I'm just wondering, even in those cases, how do you deal with the regional agencies? Do you expect many of your clients to be regional center clients? And then how does that work as far as space to accommodate staff and for people with 24/7 supported living, so forth?
Who raises their hand first?
Sure, that's quite a few questions to answer, but I'll try. I think I can just say that we have a couple different setups. So we are a nonprofit, but we receive about 80% of our funding from regional center, from SSI, and the 20% is fundraised from families, from donations, from grants. So the way it works is that we have two 6-bed licensed homes, and then we have supported living. Now, when we took that step 7 years ago, we took a step into the unknown. And what came out of that was, oh, we're committing to these families for life. There's no, I mean, even if you age out at 59 of a 6-bed, you can still have up to 2 of those 6 people, 2 to 3, because there's no places oftentimes for people to go. But we wanted to say, okay, if they're non-ambulatory anymore and their fire clearance doesn't allow, they have a supported living home to go to. And so, yes, we receive funding. We work with regional center. We work with licensing with our 2 larger homes. But this SLS is great because it allows for the flexibility to be more independent or to have higher needs. So that's our experience.
Thank you, Anya. Anyone else comment on that?
I can comment.
Saanen?
We are also vendored by North Bay Regional Center. That's a regional center in our area. And so our day program and our residential programs are both vendored. I wish we had your numbers of how much fundraising versus state sources. We're in a little different place. We have to raise about 1/3 of our budget through fundraising. But again, some families are able to contribute some, and most are not able to contribute anything. So we do fundraising efforts through grant writing and various fundraisers throughout the year. But we are all of our programs are vended. We're also licensed by Community Care Licensing as well.
Good?
Okay.
Okay.
For clarification, Costanoa Commons is definitely a different animal than what was just described. And the primary difference, for those of you that may not be familiar, is that we Costanoa Commons is not going to be a provider of service, and that's really critical. So if you are looking for an option, where that service is bundled as part of your housing, which again was my inspiration for Costanoa Commons, Camphill and L'Arche, and so forth. Costanoa Commons is not that. So we will be providing housing, and housing that I think will be designed very, very well for all the things we talked about. But people who live at Costanoa Commons will be responsible for their own person-centered plan and their own support services related to that. We fully expect economies of scale to result for SLS providers, who will hopefully be serving more than one consumer in our housing, and there will be opportunities for that to happen, for that provider network to be shared and so forth. But, it's important to make that distinction.
Thank you. Desiree, this might be a good time for you to tell us about the difference between provider-controlled housing and consumer-controlled housing.
So essentially what Heidi was describing is also reflected not just in terms of accessing supports, but in policy as well. And so a consumer-controlled setting is similar to what Heidi is developing, and I believe Rident Park and Sweetwater Spectrum, where they are just developing housing, and people will be looking for their providers, creating their own person-centered plans, et cetera. The situations where a service provider and the housing are tied are called provider-controlled settings. So that's like a typical group home situation, and those have a little bit more in detail and specific regulations. If you're interested in knowing more about these regulations, I'm doing a session just after this in some room. Look for Desiree, Kameka, and in policy and person-centered planning. But it's really important to know what are the benefits and considerations when you're looking for either creating your own project or looking for a housing option for your loved one, whether you want to go the provider-controlled route or the consumer-controlled route. There's certainly benefits and considerations for both. If you go to the Autism Housing Network, I have a virtual tour that kind of gives a landscape of what's the benefits and considerations for multiple models. You just go to the Autism Housing Network, go to the education page, and there's a button for virtual tour. Watch that virtual tour, and it'll give you a lot more in-depth information on the benefits and considerations of both.
Thank you, Desiree. We've got more questions. Look at this.
Are there any type of grants that are available to start programs like this, or does it have to come out of y'all's pocket?
No
I can
grants
answer
for
that.
us. I can tell you, not that I'm aware of, and we looked, and that's an issue, right? Is that California, as probably most of you know, ended its redevelopment agencies a number of years ago. Federal government has not allocated much of any notice in terms of funding for new affordable housing, in any substantial way. In many Bay Area counties, there's a wait list to get on the wait list for Section 8 housing. I mean, it's grim. So I'm not aware of any, which is why we went this route. I mean, our families are not a group of wealthy families either, but we are a group of families who felt like we could do more together than any of us could afford to do with our own individual resources. Other people may know of other. Dan?
There's not to say that one can't use creativity to try. I mean, it is very tough, right? But I'm sure there are grants out there, but there are also like groups like Sunflower Hill that, are using development set-asides that, developers, in order to create their project, have to provide sometimes a certain amount of low-income housing or fund a pool of money for that. And many of our consumers qualify under that. So they are actually using, in order to, in some cases, allow the developer to get a higher density bonus by providing affordable housing. They're taking the affordable housing piece off the developer's hands. The developer is getting extra houses that they can build, and Sunflower Hill is getting a project. So there are ways to do it. But frankly, mostly it's going to be, you got to pay to play.
Thank you, Dan. Uli has just very politely reminded me we've got time for one more question.
One more question, maybe to Larry. When you set up a nonprofit, I thought the mandate might be open to everyone. You cannot have a preference. How could you offer an option for long-term needs? How could you prevent someone who does not donate to the nonprofit from walking into your door saying, "I like to lease"?
This is a Section 8 problem she's asking. If you have Section 8 housing, you don't have first dibs on the bedrooms.
No. Yeah, no, it doesn't apply. Well, first of all, the practical matter is there is no Section 8 financing.
Her question was, how can she be sure if she climbs in bed that her child gets a spot?
So it's my understanding, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the part of the reason that some people create the LLC model
Exactly.
with the nonprofit, providing services or being related is that a nonprofit, if you form a nonprofit and you build housing, there's no guarantee like your children will get that housing. It's open to the public. So I think that's the...
Yeah, that was my question. So how do you handle that, Larry?
Well, first of all, we're governed by federal fair housing law so that we make sure that we're completely consistent with that. That means we're, as a landlord, we're open to lease our property to anybody that we so choose to make that offer to. So it is very open, but with only 16 opportunities, when time comes for the application process, like any landlord, we're going to evaluate our future residents in the same way that any other landlord would. And we can't, and the good news is, fair housing law is one of the things it's designed to do is protect against discrimination against protected classes. Well, we're actually the opposite. We're providing housing 100% for a protected class. And it's kind of like taking the argument and flipping it around. So technically, we could lease the property to anybody, even without disabilities, but we chose to serve a very underserved population. And but it'll be open to anybody that would choose to apply.
Thank you, Larry.
But it's an overcrowded market. Many people have disabilities, are looking for housing. How do you choose among those families?
What's that? Yeah, well, I mean, it's a function of applying for a leased space. I mean, if there's other projects, you can attempt to apply for a lease, but again, we have finite space available. So there has to be an ability to pay the rent. That's fundamental to any landlord-tenant situation. Other than that, the criteria are identical for any other type of rental situation.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. I'd like to close with a wonderful quote from Sun Tzu, which was drafted by my daughter, who's sitting here in the second row. This is, Sun Tzu was The Art of War, and this quote is in urging you to picture the garden before it is planted. This is what we're telling you to do. You've got to plant a garden out there. No one's going to do it for you. You must picture what it is you want. You must roll up your sleeves and you must make it happen. Thank you, panelists, for being here. Thank you, people, for listening to us.